What if LeBron James and Dwyane Wade went to Chicago in 2010? So in a media interview a couple of months ago, LeBron James and Dwyane Wade both admitted that they heavily considered signing with the Chicago Bulls and Derrick Rose. Wade told reporters that back in 2010, he and James were looking at Chicago as a place to team up, but the Bulls couldn't create enough cap space as the Miami Heat did, allowing Chris Bosh to take his place as the third super friend. Had they been able to though, it would have been insane. Would fanatic Bulls fans that watch Michael Jordan play urge LeBron to be the greatest player of all time? How would Derrick Rose play? Would he still win his MVP? How would LeBron play with Joakim Noah? Let's find out. Heading into the 2010 draft, the Bulls had one thing in mind, and it was to trade forward Luol Deng. Now, this is the price that they had to pay just to have a chance of getting LeBron James and Dwyane Wade, but they knew if they could create cap space, they'd have a very strong chance. Especially because Wade said the only other place he'd love to play in would be Chicago. There was actually a trade involving Deng to the Clippers, and I quote from Dwyane Wade himself, "Had Deng been traded to the Los Angeles Clippers that summer, it would have been a different story." Obviously, in this scenario, the Bulls are looking to trade Deng, and in real life, the Clippers and Bulls were actually in serious trade talks. Like, this was a genuine thing at the time of 2010. Deng to the Clippers. The Chicago Bulls would receive the 8th overall pick, and the Los Angeles Clippers would receive Deng and pick 17. The Bulls took Aminu with the 8th overall pick, which is pretty unlucky considering that both Paul George and Gordon Hayward were available, but in saying that, had Chicago selected Paul George or Gordon Hayward, they probably wouldn't develop into superstars if they were playing behind LeBron James and Dwyane Wade. Hayward heads to Utah and Paul George still goes to Indiana. The Clippers, on the other hand, have a small forward now in Luol Deng, and with the 17th overall pick, they select Avery Bradley, a player that would be really useful for this team considering he was a lockdown defender and he could either play the point guard or the shooting guard position if need be. Now you might be thinking that that's it. The Los Angeles Clippers have done pretty well in this draft. I mean, they've acquired Deng, a lockdown defender and a really good small forward, and Avery Bradley, who will turn into be a lockdown defender as well, and he's a combo guard, but they're not done. If you remember, the Clippers also made a trade with the Thunder to acquire Eric Bledsoe, and that trade still happens. So the Clippers ultimately end up with Deng, Bledsoe, and Avery Bradley to pair up with Blake Griffin. And they're looking like a super promising team compared to the original offseason where they ended up with Al-Farouq Aminu and Eric Bledsoe. Heading into the 2010 free agency, we all know it's coming. With all this cap space, the Bulls not only had room for LeBron James, but for Dwyane Wade as well, both on max contracts and no pay cuts. And on July 10th, 2010, LeBron James and Dwyane Wade signed with the Chicago Bulls, joining Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah. Now, I know what you're probably thinking, LeBron James and Joakim Noah on the same team? Trust me, when NBA players become teammates, things change, and even if they truly dislike each other, they'll forget about it on the court. The most recent example is Dwyane Wade and Rondo. We've seen the battles and the fights on the court, but just a few years later, they're playing for the same team. So let's just say Joakim Noah and LeBron James put their differences aside, and they get ready to play for a big season. I know it's hard to imagine, like right now I'm struggling to say it, but I don't know how to continue the story if they aren't teammates, so I guess we have to roll with it. It's only logical to believe that if LeBron and Wade ended up in Chicago, that things will be looking an awful lot different down in Miami right now. Obviously no LeBron and no Wade equals no Chris Bosh, and Chris Bosh would have ended up in another town. The question remains, however, which one? At the time of 2010, Bosh was being heavily pursued by the Houston Rockets, who without Yao Ming was a franchise without a face. They definitely had pieces and draft picks available to conjure up a sign and trade deal with the Toronto Raptors, which is exactly what Chris Bosh would have wanted. For argument's sake, let's just assume that this deal went through. Toronto could have received young players like Chase Budinger, Courtney Lee and Patrick Patterson, along with future draft picks, and Houston would have received the all-star in Chris Bosh, a 24-10 player, a fresh start in his home of Texas, and he would be the man. Carlos Boozer obviously doesn't end up in Chicago anymore, and he finds himself in a Detroit Pistons uniform. So a nucleus of Taj Gibson, rookie Al-Farouq Aminu, Omer Asik, Kyle Korver, Joakim Noah and Derrick Rose to go along with the two superstars of LeBron James and Dwyane Wade, was enough to keep the Bulls on top of the Eastern Conference for pretty much the entire season. And oh my god, how could I forget? They had the GOAT, Brian Scalabrine. Could this team get any more stacked?
Smoke weed every day.
During the season, Carmelo Anthony still gets traded from Denver to New York in a pretty big trade, but with the big four of Wade, Rose, LeBron, and Noah, the Bulls run over the East and practically the entire NBA, to be honest with you. They hit 65 wins in their first season together, and the MVP race was far different than in real life. Rose, now that he wasn't the best player in Chicago and didn't lead the Bulls to the first seed on his own, he'd never been named the youngest MVP winner ever. The players that actually had a chance to win the MVP this season were Dwight Howard, LeBron James, Kobe Bryant, and Kevin Durant. Now, for those that don't know, you have to finish top 3 seed if you want to win the MVP. The last player to win an MVP and not finish in the top 2 seed was in 1999, so even being top 3 seed and winning an MVP is a rarity. The 2011 MVP was one of the hardest to predict because Rose had to share his offense with Wade and LeBron, and his scoring numbers dropped, a little bit like Stephen Curry this year since Durant's on the team now. LeBron James wasn't going to get the award because just like in real life, this was the season that most NBA fans didn't support his move. The guy who actually finished second in real life for the MVP was Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard has an even better case to win the MVP in this scenario as well because Miami drops out of the playoff race and the Magic jump up into the 3rd seed in the East. And Dwight averages 23 points, 14 rebounds, 2.5 blocks per game. That means Dwight was the 3rd player in NBA history to win Defensive Player of the Year and the MVP award in the same season. Now, I know that this is going to get a lot of hate in the comment section, but people forget how good he was in Orlando. He led his team to the NBA Finals, and frankly, without Derrick Rose winning the MVP, he deserved to win the MVP this season. As for the other teams around the league, obviously Miami drops out of the playoff race and in fact finished with the worst record in the NBA. The Bucks take the 8th seed, and in the West the Clippers finish as the 10th seed, but see some major improvements with Deng on the team. The playoffs begin with the Bulls stomping through the Bucks and then defeating the Atlanta Hawks in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. They advance into the Eastern Conference Finals against Ray Allen, Paul Pierce, Kevin Garnett, and the Boston Celtics. It went to 5 games, but the Bulls outshined the Celtics, and they'd advanced on to the NBA Finals. It was still Dirk Nowitzki, Tyson Chandler, Jason Kidd, and the Dallas Mavericks who awaited them in the NBA Finals. Now, this series went down to the wire, a lot closer than the Miami Heat series in real life. The Bulls team had way too many scoring threats. LeBron James still didn't have the greatest finals series, but Dwyane Wade was still here holding his own in the NBA Finals, and this was Derrick Rose's best season in the NBA. With 2 MVP type players in Rose and LeBron, Wade was the 3rd option, and Noah as a defensive presence, it was actually the Bulls who would capture their first NBA championship since 1998. LeBron James finally got his first ring, and the move from his hometown to Chicago was worth it. Obviously, heading into the offseason, the Chicago Bulls were on top of the world, and if they thought it couldn't get any better, they go into the 2011 NBA draft with the 30th overall pick, not expecting anything, and they land Jimmy frickin' Butler. Are you serious? This is who they'd land in real life, and I know what you're thinking, there is just no way, but when you break it down and when you think about it, the Bulls finished with the 1st seed in real life too. Nothing changes here, which is honestly super insane and just crazy. They have Jimmy Butler off the bench. But during the draft, there were some major changes. Since the Clippers do better with Deng on the team, their pick is obviously worse. And that pick was actually traded to the Cleveland Cavaliers in real life, which they selected Kyrie Irving, meaning the Cavs now don't have the 1st overall pick. They go down to the 3rd overall pick, and instead, it goes to the team with the worst record, the Miami Heat, and they select Kyrie Irving. The Clippers end up selecting Bismack Biyombo, and the other notable changes were that Kawhi was not selected by the Pacers since they did better with Miami falling out of the playoffs, and they obviously made the playoffs. The Pacers selected Morris at pick 14, and the 76ers actually end up with pick 15, but they don't select Kawhi Leonard either. They select Vucevic since they're in need for a big man, and so with pick 17, the New York Knicks select Kawhi Leonard, giving the Rockets Iman Shumpert since they got pick 18 instead of pick 14 since they played better with Bosh on the team. Sort of confusing, but it makes sense if you Listen slowly. So on we go into the 2011-12 season. This was actually a horrible season in real life for the Chicago Bulls, and we all know why. In saying that, in this scenario, things happen and things change. Chris Paul still ends up getting traded to the Los Angeles Clippers, but since they don't have a menu and some of their other original pieces, they trade Eric Bledsoe, Bismack Biyombo, Chris Kaman, and a 2012 first overall pick. The Clippers now have a team of Chris Paul, Avery Bradley, Luol Deng, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. That is literally the perfect team that they've been waiting for every year in real life. What's always been the Clippers' problem is no small forward. Now they have the perfect team. It's a young team, but it looks promising. The Heat are pretty happy with the production of Kyrie Irving in his first season, and he ends up winning Rookie of the Year this season, since Miami literally has nobody else. The Knicks are a very strong team in the East, remembering that Kawhi Leonard was picked by the New York Knicks in the 2011 NBA draft, and although he isn't that great in his first season in the league, he looks to be a promising player for the future, and the Knicks look great. Once again, the Bulls control the league with LeBron winning the MVP, and the Bulls finishes the first seed in the East. Heading into the playoffs, the Chicago Bulls would face off against the 76ers, once again, just like in real life, but the outcome was completely different. Since the Bulls as a team were better than in real life, they never left their starting lineup at the end of the game. No need to have LeBron James, Dwyane Wade, Derrick Rose, and Joakim Noah in against a clearly worse 76ers team. Instead, Derrick Rose, Joakim Noah, LeBron James, and Dwyane Wade ended up just staying on the bench in the last quarter and let the bench unit end the game with a young Jimmy Butler and Al-Farouq Aminu. They swept the 76ers and advanced to face off against the Boston Celtics, who gave the Bulls a challenge once again, but they struggled keeping up with the young legs of the Bulls, who'd advanced to face against the New York Knicks out of all teams. They had a starting lineup of Jeremy Lin, Kawhi Leonard, Carmelo Anthony, Amari Stoudemire, and Tyson Chandler, with J.R. Smith as the sixth man. Since there was no Miami Heat team to blow them out in the first round, they made it all the way to the Eastern Conference Finals, but losing 6 games, as the Bulls were now advanced to the NBA Finals for the second straight year. They would face off against a young Oklahoma City Thunder squad, who still make it to the NBA Finals just like in real life, even with all the changes in the NBA landscape. Chicago, after winning the previous year, knew what it took to win again, and they seem to be more experienced in clutch situations compared to the Thunder, but in saying that, the Thunder's core of Harden, Westbrook, and Durant was young and scary, so it looked like they'll be back here eventually. The Bulls won in 6 games, and now LeBron had 2 NBA championships, while Dwyane Wade just gained his 3rd. Heading into the 2012 NBA draft, since the Cleveland Cavaliers never get Kyrie Irving previously, they end up getting the first overall pick, and they would select Anthony Davis, and the Hornets would end up selecting Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. A pretty big change if you're a Pelicans fan. The only major change in this year's draft was that the Miami Heat with just Kyrie Irving get a top 3 overall pick, and select Bradley Beal, and the Wizards select Dion Waiters. Heading into the 2012 free agency, the only notable moves were Dwight Howard, the previous MVP, not last season but the year before, and Steve Nash end up in Los Angeles. And James Harden still gets traded from Oklahoma to Houston because they didn't want to pay him max. So Houston now has James Harden and Chris Bosh, and they look pretty good going into next season. So on we go into the 2012-13 NBA season. It's all pretty much the same as the regular season in real life, surprisingly, until we get into the NBA playoffs. Then we see some major changes. To give a quick recap on the regular season though, Kawhi is really evolving in New York. Bosh and Harden are actually playing really well together, and the Thunder definitely regret trading James Harden immediately, just like in real life. The Clippers finally look like they'll be in the NBA Finals, and the Spurs are not really the same without Kawhi on the team. Oh yeah, and the Lakers are really disappointing with Steve Nash and Dwight Howard, trying to do something with Kobe Bryant, but it just never happened. LeBron once again wins the MVP, and one thing did happen though. Although Derrick Rose doesn't tear his ACL completely the year before, he does feel little niggles here and there with little injuries in his knees just because of the way he plays. Throughout his career, he'd have to deal with little injuries, but nothing major like he had to go in real life. Wade and Noah also have a few injuries throughout the year, but they are pretty much healthy heading into the playoffs. The Bulls would face the Raptors in the first round and sweep them easily. Then they would go on to face the Nets, and once again, it was an easy win in 5 games. In the West, it was the Clippers who defeat the Houston Rockets with James Harden and Chris Bosh in 7 games, and the Thunder who beat the Spurs without Kawhi Leonard. That means in the conference finals, it was the Knicks vs Bulls in the East, and the Clippers vs Thunder in the West. Both series were extremely close, but in the end, the NBA Finals came down to the Bulls versus the Clippers. Now, the Bulls had the advantage with experience going into these 2013 NBA Finals, but it was in fact the Clippers who really surprised the league. Chris Paul and Avery Bradley did a brilliant job on Wade and Rose, and Deng, who was a great defender, did all he could against LeBron James. In the end though, the Bulls had no answer for Blake Griffin at the power forward position since they didn't really have a good power forward. They had really good players at every other position apart from the power forward position, and here's something you don't hear very often. The Clippers are the NBA champions. They stopped the Bulls from a three-peat, and Chris Paul finally captured his first NBA championship. The offseason was highlighted with notable moves from free agency, since the draft didn't impact the league at all. It was one of the worst drafts in NBA history. Chris Paul re-signed with the Clippers after winning the NBA championship, but Dwight Howard, who was frustrated in LA, looked to go elsewhere. He was intrigued by Houston since they had Harden, but he didn't like the idea of playing with another big man in Chris Bosh, who, to be honest with you, they would work pretty well together, but Dwight Howard didn't want to go there. Dwight wanted to go to a team with guards, and Miami was the perfect fit. He'd get max money to play in Miami, and he'd get to play with Kyrie Irving and Bradley Beal. Not a bad choice. The 2013-14 season was pretty much the same as the year before. Although we do see an increase in wins for a few teams, it doesn't really affect the big picture, which is the Bulls and the NBA Finals. The Miami Heat finally made the playoffs with Kyrie Irving, Bradley Beal and Dwight Howard, and we saw the Knicks really turn into a title contender in the East. Joakim Noah won Defensive Player of the Year, and it was actually Kevin Durant who took away the MVP from LeBron James, just like in real life. Just like in real life as well, the Bulls would get hit with some serious news. Obviously in real life it wasn't the Bulls, but in real life it was Dwyane Wade. Dwyane Wade was not 100% healthy this season, and he struggled a little bit in the playoffs. Rose also had some injuries that would cause him to miss over 20 games in the regular season, but they still had LeBron James and Joakim Noah holding it down for the team. The Bulls would once again make it to the Eastern Conference Finals, and this time they'd actually face off against the Indiana Pacers, where we'd see the emergence of Paul George. In the West, the defending champions, the Los Angeles Clippers, actually didn't make it, and we instead saw a matchup with the Thunder taking on the San Antonio Spurs. Now the Spurs were a decent team, obviously. They were pretty good. Tony Parker, Manu Ginobili, Timmy D. But they didn't have Kawhi Leonard, and he was one of the big reasons they made it to the NBA Finals in real life this season. So without Kawhi, the Spurs literally had no answer for the MVP in Kevin Durant, and they'd go on to face the Bulls in the NBA Finals once again. Last time the Thunder were in this position, they literally had no experience in the NBA Finals, but this time they were ready. They saw an injury-riddled team of Rose and Wade, and the young legs of Westbrook and Durant helped capture OKC's first ever NBA title. Now, this is probably going to get quite controversial in the comment section, but originally in real life, it was a domination by the San Antonio Spurs, who beat the Miami Heat 4-1, and this eventually led to LeBron James returning back home to Cleveland. The same thing happens here. The Bulls wouldn't lose in 5 games though, but instead they would lose in back-to-back NBA Finals series, and LeBron James had enough. He wanted to return back home to Cleveland, and he did it that summer, making the statement, "I'm coming home." The Bulls still kept Derrick Rose, Wade, and Noah for the next few years, but they never made it to the NBA Finals again. Just like in real life after LeBron James came back, the Cavaliers would still be the team LeBron James goes to, even without Kyrie Irving. If you remember, the Cavaliers drafted Anthony Davis back in 2012, and teaming Davis up with LeBron James would be scary for the NBA. As LeBron James goes back home to play with Davis, they also trade Andrew Wiggins away, this time not for Kevin Love since they have Davis, but instead they trade Andrew Wiggins away and some future picks to the Washington Wizards in exchange for John Wall, since Wall was becoming frustrated in Washington without Bradley Beal on the team and no playoffs his entire career. Now the next few years would play out just like in real life. The Warriors win the championship in 2015, LeBron brings the first ever championship to Cleveland in 2016, and actually, something huge does happen. Kevin Durant does not go to the Warriors in the summer of 2016, as he's already captured his NBA championship in OKC, and there was no reason for him to leave. The Warriors would still be great without him, but it would make life much easier for LeBron James to capture many more championships for years to come. So, if LeBron James and Dwyane Wade went to Chicago in 2010, it would have changed the entire landscape of the NBA for about 5 years. And then after that, LeBron would return to Cleveland and things would pretty much play out just like in real life. Pretty crazy to think about. And guys, I need you to show a lot of support in this video if you enjoyed it. If you're new around here and you like this video, be sure to subscribe for more What If videos. And if you enjoyed this What If video, show me you did. Show me you did by smashing the thumbs up button and telling me down below in the comment section what other What Ifs that you'd like to watch. And tell me if I should upload more of these more frequently because they take so long to make. And yeah, like I said, please subscribe if you're new. If this is the first video that you've seen and you're not subscribed, hit that subscribe button and I'll catch you guys in my next video. Peace!